We knew we could get it to an income of north of 180,000.
And honestly, I've said this on like so many talks and like on our Instagram, that is most likely the number one thing that you can do if you have the basics for your property.
Do you have a baseline in mind where you've calculated, based on all of the costs, this is the lowest that I'd accept and I'd rather be vacant?
We were so concerned about having a full calendar, like getting to 95, 100% occupancy. That's a lot of different turnovers, and you probably slash the price, so you're likely making less with more stays, and your net is going to be significantly lower.
Most people in medium density areas do not take that part seriously.
We tell people this all the time. We would rather have 65, 70% occupancy, but maximize our revenue than to have 100% occupancy. It's kind of like a mental shift where you have to really let yourself go unbooked for a bit. This isn't passive. This is a very active thing. Even if you only have one, you really have to be active in looking at all of this. We realized really early on how hands-on it was. And that is instantly when we said, we need to create systems so this business can operate while we are in Asia for a month, while we are in Bali for a month, while we're in recently Europe for a month.
The revenue management strategy can be the difference of an extra 20, 30, 40 plus thousand a year just from simply.
Spencer and Ashley didn't just scale short-term rentals, they obsessed over every system, guest interaction, and design detail until their properties became unforgettable experiences. Short-term rentals aren't passive, and the best operators aren't chasing volume, they're crafting experiences. Let's get into it. Guys, I want to welcome you both to the show.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
I'm excited to dive in. So would you guys mind telling us a little bit for the listeners out there who don't know who you guys are and they don't know your journey? Do you mind telling us a little bit about how you first got into real estate and what was the first strategy that appealed to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, we got started, I guess it was back in 2017. I had a friend that was into student rentals. And he had like 4 or 5 of them, and he had like a normal job, but I was kind of so curious. I'm like, how are you buying? It seemed like a house every like 6 to 8 months. And sat down with him, and he kind of went over the BRRRR strategy and explained that whole side of it and how he was able to kind of continue to roll the next one project into the next. So I said, look, we got to do this. I need it on this. Like at that time, I had no idea about short-term rentals. I'm like, I just want to invest in real estate. Like the numbers were crazy. It was crazy not to. At that time, Ashley had her own like personal house that she was indirectly house hacking. She was living here and had like 3 or 4 of her friends that she went to university with, staying here, renting it by the room. So she was basically covering her costs and didn't know what house hacking was back then. And I hadn't owned anything yet. So we ended up buying our first property here, and we're from Niagara region. So it was in St. Catharines. And originally we were going to look at a flip, but then we had a friend say, you should try short-term rentals. He had 3 or 4 in Collingwood at the time, and I think 1 in the Niagara region. And he's like, the numbers are awesome. So I dove into that and got really excited when I was starting to see like the potential that it could bring in. So we did that. We renovated the house, like pretty much gutted it, brought it back to life, to say the least, and spent the extra amount on the furniture and the amenities and the decor. And yeah, when it went live, we were super nervous, but within a month, we were basically relieved and super excited because the income that was being generated and the bookings that were coming through made everything worth it and just made us even more excited, to the point where, you know, you saw what was happening, and she wanted in. So then basically we bought a house like 7 doors down the street from that one when it came for sale. And we just kept rolling as far as the banks would let us. And then we got creative, and then we created TravelX, which is now our management company that has just under 60 properties across Canada and a few in the United States.
Got it. Okay. So I'm pretty curious, once you were in it, because for the short-term rental space, there's a lot of people that either feel super excited about it, or on the other end, they're really nervous about getting into that because it's a little less predictable running your numbers, or it seems that way, compared to a long-term rental. It's like, okay, well, this is what the rents are. This is what I could expect vacancy to be for property of this size, type, condition, location. So it seems pretty standard, at least on a quote unquote pro forma, right? Once you got into it, what were some early signals that told you, look, this model had more depth than you expected, especially in how demand, guest behavior, and pricing actually work? Once you actually got that experience, what did that look like for you guys?
Well, I think we were pretty lucky to get in at the time that we did because housing prices were still fairly good. They weren't as cheap as they were like prior, but we got in at a fairly good time and demand for the area was still pretty high. So the location of both of these homes that we were talking about is right across from a beach. So in the summer,
Oh,
it does really, really well. Exactly. So it exceeded our expectations. Our mortgage and our
yeah.
covering costs were low, probably under $3,500 for the month. And we've far exceeded that, knowing next to nothing about revenue management. We have come so far in the
Yeah.
world of revenue management now because it matters. And the world of Airbnb and short term rentals really has changed since then because when we look back on the decor and everything that we chose for these homes, it was super basic, super cheap, IKEA type of furniture. And now we would
Yes.
never do that in a home because guests won't stay. So we were lucky that we were able to have our learning curve at a time when guests were still paying a decent amount of money. Our covering costs were low. And then through those years, we've learned. And by the time we hit probably 2022, which is when the landscape really changed on short-term rentals, we had a lot more
Hmm.
knowledge of revenue and how to run numbers and how to host in a more professional way.
Got it. No, that makes sense. You guys were really lucky in the time that you got started was just a little bit more forgiving,
Mm-hmm.
in that you could sort of find your footing, see what works, what doesn't work, and then sort of iterate as things progressed. And, there's more potential, more competition. So you need to get your listing to stand out and attract guests, and then also give you the time to figure out systems and operations of the business that you probably didn't have a lot of experience going into it, right? Because it's a different ball game compared to just a
Mm-hmm.
long-term rental. You actually you in the hospitality business, not just supplying housing, right? So yeah, I'm curious, like as you began to get traction, which seemed like it was pretty pretty instant for you guys. The great location, great time to get in. But as you began to get traction, what became clear about, like, maybe not early missteps, but things that could be improved on, or misconceptions that you maybe had going into it, or little gaps where you're like, oh, okay, we need to figure that out. We need to work on that. That you potentially, even up until today, see new hosts potentially going in the wrong direction right from the get-go when getting things set up and getting into the strategy.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many moving pieces, so there's not
Hmm.
like one specific solve for that answer. There's so many things. I think the first thing when we first got it started was we were so conservative on our numbers, like we're very risk adverse,
Yeah.
and we wanted to like we had access to data. We weren't the first short-term rental in the Niagara region, so fortunately, like we could go and see all of the properties and within $5,000 a year, what they bring in revenue wise. And we could look at what they provide, right? What amenities they have, how the photos look, how their marketing is, what they price. So we were pretty confident knowing, hey, if we can make it like these properties over here, we'll fall into that bucket of revenue. If we can make it like these properties here, we should land there. And one thing that we didn't account for was what you can do to actually like exceed that. Because the first thing that I did is what are the top 10 properties doing in this area? What do they have? What's the homes, right? Some were waterfront, not affordable. I'm like, okay, we're not going to go on the water, but a lot weren't. And they were making pretty similar revenue, right? So there was certain amenities like hot tubs. And at the time
Yeah.
there was no saunas. So there was certain amenities that I knew worked in other parts of the country and the States that a lot of hosts had implemented where I'm like, hey, I don't have the data for this per se in Niagara, but I know that if we bring this in, we're going to be one of one. And there has to be some benefit to that. So I would say from the amenity side, that was something that like we didn't really like anticipate and never thought of. And it was a bit scary to say like, hey, I got to go spend 15 grand on changing the electrical and buying a hot tub and the cover for it, the string lights and getting it installed and set up. Don't really know how much it's going to bring in, but we're going to take that chance. The second most important one Ashley kind of touched on was the revenue management side.
Yes.
Most people in medium density areas do not take that part seriously. And honestly, I've said this on like so many talks and like on our Instagram, that is most likely the number one thing that you can do if you have the basics for your property. If the property's nice and set up and marketed decently, the revenue management strategy can be the difference of an extra 20, 30, 40 plus thousand a year just from simply implementing that and paying attention to it. Because a lot of people are just individual hosts. They get lazy. They go, you know what, my high season is my high season. I'm going to set it and it's great. Some people might forget to lower the price and then have to crash, discount it last minute. But the big one is like slow season too, where people are just like, oh crap, it's slow season. Now there's 1,000 listings I'm competing against. And now I really have to slash my prices if I want to get booked at all. So just having a proactive strategy there for the full 365 can make a huge, huge difference.
And something to add to that as well is when we first started, I think we were so concerned about having a full calendar, like getting to 95, 100% occupancy. And our opinion of that has dramatically shifted. And we tell people this all the time, like we would rather have 65, 70% occupancy, but maximize our revenue than to have 100% occupancy, a lot of overhead, because that's a lot of different turnovers, and you've probably slashed the price. So you're likely making less with more stays, and your net is going to be significantly lower than what we're going to do. And I think it's kind of like a mental shift where you have to really let yourself go unbooked for a bit. And Spencer's the guru on the revenue management, can talk about lead time and stuff, which is what he tracks and looks at all the time. But it really goes back to that. This is a very active thing. This isn't passive. Even if you only have one, you really have to be active in looking at all of this. And the other one is definitely even decor on the inside. Like going back, I would have spent an extra 5 to 10 inside just to make it look nicer, because photos are how you're attracting people to your listing.
Oh, 100%. Oh, guys, there's a lot to unpack there.
I know.
Okay, so I want to get into the revenue management thing, and I want to get into a little bit more of the advanced things. I've spoken about this topic a few times, but I like catering for a spectrum of listeners out there, ones that are just getting started or looking to get into it, and then ones that are looking to sort of just level up and continue to just improve on that. So, one thing you mentioned there with the hot tub, and this is funny because I had another guest on a while back, and it wasn't on the show, but I asked him in person when I ran into him. I think like Airbnb, the first thing I think of is hot tub. If I want to go stay, I want a hot tub. You know what I mean? And I asked him what his take on that was, and it was completely different. He was like, no, he wouldn't do a hot tub, and the reason why is because of the tenant profile or the guest profile that you would attract. Having a hot tub, you get more parties, louder guests, potentially more problems. What's your experience been with, installing a hot tub? What's that look like?
It's actually so funny because the first year and a half, 2 years, I was so anti hot tub for that reason.
Yeah.
And the maintenance on it, right? Obviously, if you have a same day changeover in the water, you can only do so much with chemicals, right? And even if you have the proper wired in hot tub, it can take at least 12 hours to heat back up. So originally I was like, it's not worth the potential negative reviews. Then I had a friend of mine who said, you know what, if you can figure that out, that's a big kind of barrier to entry. If you can figure out the operations and the guest avatar and kind of vetting those people. So I don't really think there really is anything different that we do because we have a hot tub. Our vetting process has always been the same. Like, to avoid parties, we're very, very strict in our verbiage about how, our guest avatar is mainly like families, mature couples for a lot of our properties. We tailor the design and the amenities and the pricing to attract that. Not to say that there aren't, really immature people that can afford that type of place, because they can. But another big thing is we put in safeguards like exterior security cameras, noise sensors, which are very much mentioned in the listing. So that typically does keep away 90 to 95% of the potential bad claims, because you'll get the odd person inquire being like, tell me about the noise sensors. How do those work? And it's like, okay, no reviews for, joined Airbnb last month. They're probably not going to accept that one. So we are picky in the vetting process on that. And then from the operations side for the hot tub, which is dialing in your team and having systems in place. As far as to if you have to empty the water and put it back in, like we have the commercial pumps that can get the water out in 5 minutes and they'll fill it up right away. And they do that right at 11 o'clock. It's the first thing they do. They check. And then, we might have to kind of finesse the next guest depending on what time they're checking in. And obviously, it's not perfect, but we do our best to have that water up to temperature by 7-8 o'clock when a lot of the time guests use it. And that typically is, especially in the wintertime when it starts to get dark, when people will go in, or the next morning. But either way, like we'll kind of get a gauge on that. And we have our team go in and kind of find out when they're checking in. And if it's right at 4, we mention something, and some people don't show up till 10 or 11 because they're out of town. And it's like, okay, won't be an issue by then. So we don't mention it.
Got it. And that makes a ton of sense, because I know for me personally, if I'm looking to stay in a Airbnb property, I would 100% go for the one that's got a hot tub versus one that doesn't. So I absolutely get that. You solve that problem, and now it's given you a huge competitive edge above others. Now, I definitely want to touch on the revenue management, because it's a big thing. And there was one thing you mentioned there, Ashley, which was I think for anyone in any form of business, it's a mental thing to get over. Is being busy is one thing, maximizing profits is another thing, and not confusing the two, right? Those are two different things. And the goal for any business is to be as profitable as possible. So that should be what you're striving for, not to be as busy as possible. We sometimes conflate busy with being productive, and it's not the same thing. And it's the same for running an Airbnb business, because ultimately it's a business at the end of the day. So I really want to dive deeper into that, so that listeners out there can really figure out for themselves how do they ensure that they focus in and doing the right things to be more profitable, as opposed to just being more busy, giving them some peace of mind, but not actually running things as efficiently as they can. And then there was another thing you mentioned there, Spencer, which was when you guys got into it, you sort of ran the numbers so you could figure out what that revenue would look like to a certain degree, which gives you peace of mind. Because for a new investor getting into things, it's the unknown creates that high barrier of entry, where it doesn't give you the confidence to take that initial step. So how did you go about sort of getting an idea on what those numbers could look like? Because again, for a long-term rental, you go on Facebook Marketplace, you go on Rentfast, or all of these different places, you can get an idea what people are charging, and that someone's staying long-term. So that gives you peace of mind, like, okay, I could put a percentage in here for vacancies when I have turnover and stuff. But for someone new to the short-term rental space, they're like, well, I don't know what the occupancy could look like. I could see what they're charging per night, but how many nights are they booking out? What does that look like? Are there tools? What did you guys use to sort of gauge that?
So I'll tackle that question. I'll leave the more specific in-depth revenue stuff they had mentioned in the first part to Spencer. So when we were looking at revenue, we use a program called AirDNA. It's a pretty well-known tool in the short-term rental space. And we bought like the version where you could look at the whole area, and we would input the address, number of beds and baths, and it'll kind of spit out a pretty generic number and occupancy based off of other homes in the area that kind of look like yours. You can kind of go through and be like, okay, that one has a pool, mine doesn't have a pool, that doesn't make sense, and look around like that. But that gives you a very broad idea of what could be done. What we like to do then is to look at our direct competition. So say number of beds and baths looks very similar to ours, and say the income that pulled up for them is like 90,000. So we look at their listing and we're like, what do we have to do to our listing to be even just a little bit better than that listing? And it really gives you a baseline on like, okay, if my listing looks like that, that is roughly what the income is going to be expected. We don't know if the people who run the other listings have good revenue management. We don't know if they have a lot of block dates. There's a lot of unknowns in that number. So I don't want people to look into that and then live and die on the number that they see. And we say this to a lot of the clients that come in. We can say, hey, your property could bring in 130,000 a year if you also make your listing look like your competitors. You have nice amenities, you have nice decor, photos this well. If you don't do those things, we can't get your income up to that level. If you surpass that, we're confident we can also surpass that number. And we're also confident in our revenue management skills in order to do that. So I feel like that's a really good guideline. It gives you a good occupancy rate as well, number of like days out. I believe it gives you lead time as well through that program.
Yeah, you can see the lead time in the market for that as well. And there's so many filters. You can filter down to the amenity level too. Like if you want to see properties without hot tubs, you can check that. If you want to see it with only hot tubs, you can check that. And then there's other like filters, like there's a days tracked to essentially honor its validity. Because some new properties will give like an annual projection, but they've only been live for say 80 days. So it might say like projected to do 110,000, but it's only done 25,000. So someone that doesn't understand the difference between those two, they might read it's done 23 grand and it looks amazing, and they don't really understand what the projected means. So you can filter, things that are 280 days plus tracked. So if you really want to feel comfortable, find 10 properties that have that and that sleep the same amount and kind of look similar to what you want to do. And then you can be pretty comfortable that as long as you're in a similar location, there's nothing that stands out about those properties versus yours, that you should land around that area.
And maintain good reviews as well. You have to be a good host.
Yeah.
You can't just put it up there and let it go.
100%. No, and that makes sense. What you mentioned with regards to the tracking, because it would then take into account the ups and downs seasonally as well. So you have a little bit more accurate data tracking and therefore more accurate forecasting. And then yes, I want to touch on that a little bit deeper as well. As we go on, actually, is the management side, right? Because it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. Like there's a lot that goes into maintaining it. So so if we were to touch a little bit on the revenue management, what that would look like, how people can sort of level up. Maybe they in the space, but they're really not making the most of what they have, and they wanna level up and take this to the next level. What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, revenue management, there's so many factors that contribute to your overall strategy, because there's so many outside factors that can essentially determine what you set your price at. Amenities being one, photos being like another one, your marketing strategy, like all of those things make up you being able to charge more. That being said, let's say you are one of 10 properties that are very similar. They all look the same. They all have the same amenities. They sleep the same amount. Then it's going to come down to who's got the better strategy. And the number one easy free trick that I like to do is, let's say you have a listing that's live and you're not using any pricing software, because we can get into that, and that is super helpful. You can go on, and have you heard of the wish lists on Airbnb? You can go in and create like favorite certain properties.
No, I haven't. No.
Okay. So you go on Airbnb. I mean, I can't show you here, but you go on Airbnb, you can literally hit like it's a heart in the top right and wish list it. So what I always suggest doing for new people is go into your market, and you can do up to like 100 or plus. You can do more. What I usually do is like 30 to 50 of the properties that are similar to yours. Now you're going to take properties that are slightly below your quality. Like when I mean, maybe not as nice or as big or same amenities, but you're also going to take some that are slightly above. So what's nice about that is once you have those, 10 plus, 50 plus properties in that wish list that are similar to yours, when you go to the wish list group, like you go into Airbnb and click on that wish list, you can actually search by the calendar day by day. So you can search for, let's say you have availability next weekend that's not booked. You can go into that wish list and put, say, the Friday to the Sunday, and it's going to pop up all of those properties that are similar to yours that are still available and ones that are booked. And what's nice about that is it'll show on the map how much they're charging per night. So from there, you can get a gauge. Let's say out of the 50 properties, there's 5 or 10 left. You can see, okay, there's 3 of them that are nicer than mine, and they're $2,000 for the weekend. And the remainder are, let's say, $1,500. Well, depending on where you sit, you can get a gauge on what I should be charging. Obviously, time is kind of your enemy in revenue management. So if you're really close, you might want to be a bit more competitive depending on the time of the season. But that alone gives you a good gauge on your market without having to use really any property management software right then and there. So that's like kind of, I still use that to date, even though I've got all the software and the data on the back end. But really, like, the strategy that I employ and I've been employing forever is, in high season, I like to be on the later side to be booked, so last to booked. And slow season, I want to be first to book, because in high season, you've got so much more demand, a lot of people coming in. There's people that book in advance. So I'll be 30-40% higher for next summer right now than what I think I'm going to get. So if someone wants to book my places, our places now, great. You know what I mean? Like, we're getting a huge premium. But as that lead time average gets closer, and what that means is the average time, so the average amount of days before that stay, someone books. So let's say the lead time's 30 days. The average person for July is 30 days. That means the average person is booking 30 days out for that date in July. So knowing that data, I want to be kind of on the shorter side of that, because July is one of the best months in the year here. So I'm fine to let my competition get booked up now, because 2 weeks out, I know there are a ton of people that are looking to book something last minute. So I can hold my prices firm, because I'm going to be one of the last people available with that quality. Yeah. So that right there has, that strategy alone, it's a bit more nerve-wracking, because you're like, oh, I just want to be booked. And that's what most people do, is they go, hey, I'm just happy to get my $500 a night. But realistically, they could have got $750 or $1,000 if they had just waited. Especially, like, I'm not talking like Fort Lauderdale area where there's so many high-level operators. Like, if you're in an area that's kind of medium to small, like we are in Niagara, or cottage country around here, you can really, really hammer this stuff. But then slow season's the opposite. Slow season is, I do not want to be competing against those 1,000 listings 1 week or 2 weeks out. I want to try to get extended stays. So I'm putting in extended stay strategies on 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month. Like, I'm looking at what are all the properties charging for 1 month in January, February, March. And I want to make sure that I am like the best rate for the quality of that property, months ago in the summer, essentially. Yes. So that way, I do not have to worry and compete with 1,000 listings and slashing my price in January, February. I've got the 1 week, 2 week plus bookings for the majority of my properties set right now, and it's November. So that's kind of the overall goal for that, because it eliminates turnover. It's usually a higher net take home, right? With not paying as many cleaning fees and supplies and utilities. Mm-hmm. And you're not slashing your prices, even though, you go from 80% occupancy in July to 25% in February. Even if you do land at that 25 or 30%, you're getting those bookings at a better rate further out for being more competitive.
Oh, those are some great tips. Okay, to the first one that you made, question for you is, do you have, and I'm sure you do, but do you have a minimum where you're like, okay, so based on what's available, these properties are a little bit nicer than mine. This is what they're renting for, or this is what they're charging per night. These properties, not as nice. This is what they're charging per night. And you sort of gauging where to put your, where to sort of put your price. That's one. And I guess it applies for the second tip that you gave, like the slower season, where you might be lowering to get those spots filled. But do you have like a baseline in mind where you've calculated based on all of the costs, this is the lowest that I'd accept, and I'd rather be vacant otherwise? And for that, how do you personally work out what that figure looks like? Is it just a pure black and white, like these are the hard costs? Or is there also just another factor to it where you're like, you know what, anything under this number just for me doesn't make sense to have anyone in there? Just for people out there trying to figure out where it makes sense to rather just go, just have it vacant versus just accepting something for the sake of, like you mentioned earlier on, Ashley, just the peace of mind of having it filled. So yeah, let's go with that. And then I want to touch on I have a question to the second tip that you gave there, because these are fantastic. These are amazing. For the people out there, I hope they're taking notes. This is amazing. But you have any advice for people working out their bare minimum that they should accept?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few ways you can go about this. I mean, the most practical way is kind of looking at what your covering costs are by month and just make that your minimum. So to the point where you're not losing money if someone checks in. A lot of our properties we do a 2-night minimum, but again, our properties might not be the same. Like our portfolio is more larger experiential homes, so there's a lot more overhead versus say like an apartment unit, 1-bedroom studio in a major city. So like that's going to be a completely different strategy. So for these places, yeah, like we're going slightly above that minimum cost because again, there is that whole aspect of if you go too low, you can potentially attract negative guests. Not that you can still vet as best as you possibly can, but we do find that there is that kind of minimum threshold, and there's no data point obviously on, hey, if you charge this, you're getting really crappy tenants, but you will kind of get a gauge for that by that property, and unfortunately by like just kind of testing it out
Yeah.
on, hey, you know what, this is my minimum baseline. I don't want to lose money to rent this out, but at the same time it's like, okay, well, even if I charge $50 more than that break even one, we're still getting bad tenants. So yeah, again,
Yes.
as long as we're above this, then typically it's been good. That's kind of the rule that we've been following. Like, unfortunately, there isn't 100% data out there to like for
You
someone
have to sort of
starting out
find,
to do that.
yeah.
But yeah, I would work with your minimum and then go, okay, like, would I be happy getting this? Because the review aspect, there is that benefit. If they leave a 5-star review, that's going to help your listing rank higher, and that's going to inevitably bring you more bookings. So there is that aspect of opportunity cost to get that positive review versus not. But there's also the potential downside of getting a bad tenant too.
100%. No, that makes a ton of sense, right? Like you said, because the probabilities just go up when you bring the price down. That of course you might be attracting a less than ideal sort of profile or avatar of what your ideal guest looks like. No, I get that. I get that. That's a great answer. Now, I just to comment on the second tip that you gave there. I love that though, because again, it really comes down to supply and demand. Like, in almost any aspect of any business or investment, really, it's a big one. So it's really tactical, when you have the high season, to rather just be the last one there. People are looking for something. Supply is low, demand is at its highest. People are willing to pay more. So why not be the last one where there's even less supply because everyone else is booked out and people are willing to pay more, versus having the peace of mind of getting it booked out earlier. And on the flip side, when there's going to be a larger supply and less demand, rather just get that booked up in advance. That makes a ton of sense. And I'm sure a lot of people probably don't even think about that. So that's a real good one right there. Okay. Anything else other than those two major ones?
There's one more that I could add that's very easy. That's probably one of my favorites, is going in and kind of being the potential guest. And on Airbnb, when you search for a place, like I always we like to put ourselves in the guest shoes. So when you go on and you search for a place, I like to search just flexible any week, because that usually will get you every single property, because you're searching for the entire year. And there's some people that do more than a 2-night minimum. They might have a 3 or a 5. So if you search flexible any week, that typically gives you every single listing in that area, minus the medium term ones, but we're not competing with those. From there, I like to see, okay, so there's 1,000 total listings. From there, I like to go in the filter section and hit one amenity at a time to see what that number drops to. So that's something we did early on and that new people can do, is that, okay, there's 1,000 listings here, hot tub. And this alone will find out where the amenity opportunities are. Because think of it, if guests are searching for something desirable like a hot tub, and there's 1,000 listings and there's only 50 hot tubs, and this was the case when we first put in our first hot tub back in Niagara, there was 50 hot tubs in the entire Niagara region, maybe even less. That's like Hamilton down. So in Niagara on the Lake, there might have been 3. So if we put a hot tub in, we go from that 1,000 properties down to 3 in Niagara on the Lake, or 50 in the entire Niagara region. So we just immediately boosted our search rankings there. So anyone that is searching for a hot tub, your place is going to show up. And assuming that, you know, none of the other places are booked yet, you're one of 50. But the reality is a lot of those places will be booked ahead of time. So you might be one of 2 or one of 10. And just going through those amenity lists, like family items, EV chargers was a really, really big one. That was the one that we started putting in 2 or 3 years ago because no one had it and it wasn't that expensive to add, just to look at getting a competitive advantage. And that's a free way to go about and do that too, instead of having to, use AirDNA and look at it that way.
Oh, yeah. And again, while you're saying this, I'm just thinking, again, supply and demand. You know what I mean? Like, what's the supply like of all these different amenities? Where's there a lack of supply? And then I guess you could even analyze it to see these properties that have this amenity compared to similar properties that don't have the amenity. What does that potential surcharge look like? And then sort of look at what the cost is. I mean, that's one way, but aside from that, you also have to consider the fact that you'll probably get more bookings, for it, regardless of what the potential surcharge could be per night anyway. But it's pretty cool. So, okay, so you guys are playing around with this and you're sort of testing to see and really getting to know your location really, really well in terms of what these other hosts are supplying, what's out there, how can I constantly improve or get a competitive edge and just provide a better experience for the guests. So I know I've kind of been all over the place here because, people are probably thinking, well, you haven't really started with how do I get in? What are all the factors of like getting started? And then how do I manage it? And how do I just, scale from there? And I probably should have done that. But, there's stuff that you guys mentioned and I just want to peel back the layers because that just seems so intriguing. And I'm thinking while people are listening to this, they could be asking themselves the same question. So it sort of takes me down little rabbit holes. But if we were to zoom out again, because this is great on the management side, like you've got your property and you're trying to figure out how do I make this more efficient? How do I dial things in? What systems do I put in place? How do I level up? But there are some things that you could do right from the start, I guess, right? When you get into a property. So if we go completely on like the fundamental side, the one thing you guys mentioned firstly was you used AirDNA to figure out what the numbers were. You were conservative with the numbers, but you pulled comparables. It gave you an idea. What are some other factors you're thinking about when you're looking at a property from a location standpoint? Now, you guys know your location pretty well, but for someone else who's in a different part of Canada, for example, that they could sort of analyze within their city or wherever they're at, because there's different locations and property types for different sort of guests. What are some things you guys look at when you are either looking for a property for yourself or maybe someone asks you, hey, I'm looking to get a property. What's some advice or some criteria that you would mentally go through to say like, yeah, this is sort of the ideal buy box for us on a high level in terms of location. And then after that, in terms of property type, size, etc. Now, I know it's not a black and white answer because you're probably going to say, well, they're going to also have to go look to see how things look like on Airbnb. You know what I mean? What's the supply? What's the competition? You're probably going to look at some data points as well. So speaking for yourself, speaking for, the areas that you have all your properties at, what are some things that you look at? And if you were starting from the beginning, I guess, with your first property in hindsight, with all that you've learned, how would you tackle that from a fundamental level?
Yeah, so there's a lot that can go into that, as you can imagine. We always tell people if you want to get into short-term rentals, we do recommend doing it, what we'd say, in your backyard or in an area that you know really well for a lot of reasons that you mentioned, because we know when we go to certain locations, yes, this is a good area. No, that's not a good area. We know and understand tourism needs in our city. We know when guests come down, we can give recommendations on this, like we know exactly what they can do. So that's step one. Just go somewhere where you already know that people are going to come in, whether that's going to be tourism related or you get a lot of workers or whatever it is for you. That's number one. Number two is bylaws are always changing. A lot of them are getting a lot stricter. And we have seen people purchase without looking at bylaws and then find out later that they were never able to get a license. And we are very big proponents on working with the city and getting a license. We only operate and own licensed rentals where one is required because we see our relationship with the city as beneficial on both sides, right? Like we're bringing tourism to you, you're allowing us to run a business and earn an income. So this is very mutually beneficial. And the last thing you want to do is not be able to get a license. So you want to look for certain regulations. For instance, Niagara-on-the-Lake does not allow, hard stop, does not allow licenses on duplexes or townhomes. They just don't. And they only allow licenses, like the only cottage license that you can get pretty easily is a 3-bedroom. So if you have 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, that's a problem. And you either need to make a room not a room, or work with the city ahead of time before purchasing the property to see if you can close it off and they would accept that. That's all things that we would do beforehand. And we're saying this from experience because we did purchase a house with 4 bedrooms. We thought that we would be able to shut the door and lock it, and we could like slyly get under the bylaw, but they didn't allow that. And we ended up having to knock down an entire wall and put up a beam and make it open in order for them to accept the license. So we had already had this property halfway furnished, and then we had to do unannounced construction pretty quickly. So you don't want to be in that position. Once you have figured that out, you know exactly what the bylaw states. Some of them have parking, really strict parking requirements. So that's something as you're house hunting, you need to be like, okay, does it meet these restrictions? Can I get a license? I would even call the city and be like, just want to make sure you're still issuing licenses, because Niagara-on-the-Lake did put a halt on that for a little while. It's open right now. So if you're looking at getting into Niagara-on-the-Lake, kind of now's the time until they possibly reclose it again. And the second thing would be location. So we were very, very lucky that our first 3 properties that we had were all within a 30-second walk of each other, and then right on a beach that we knew was popular. And we knew it was popular because we live in the city and we would go to that beach. And the thing with this beach is we saw a lot of opportunity because it's not very built up. Like if you know St. Catharines, you have Port Dalhousie, which you have like restaurants and bars and cafes, and this one had nothing but had opportunity for that to happen. So we're seeing long-term potential in having a house that is right on that street, and they're actually doing a major renovation, and they're actually that's where the hovercraft is going between St. Catharines and Toronto, which for us is just going to up our property value and hopefully up our booking amounts. So we're always looking at location. Third is we have a certain criteria for homes that we want and what we want them to look like.
Yeah.
We've decided a long time ago that we would rather put more money into a higher end, more expensive home and the furnishings and all the amenities and yield a higher return. So the property that we purchased with a partner in Niagara-on-the-Lake, the first one in 2021, I believe, was an over $1 million property, but we knew we could get it to an income of north of 180,000, which we now have. And that makes it very, very profitable. Whereas I feel like people who have that kind of money would say, I would rather get 2 properties at $500,000 each, but we don't think the net income would yield what we're able to yield because of the experience that we're able to provide. So we're always going for higher end luxury, single family home. We don't want to deal with a lot of neighbors, so tend to be a bit more secluded. And people come to Niagara-on-the-Lake to look at the vineyards. So I prefer for it to be right on the vineyards. And it's little things like that where you make the outside such an experience for people that they're willing to pay a higher premium just to look at vines in the morning. And I know that because Spencer and I would.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. There's a lot of great stuff there. So, I know when you mentioned the bylaws as well, that got me thinking about like, when I've spoken to other short-term rental investors, and a lot of them have mentioned that they won't touch condos and stratas because of the uncertainty around that as well. But you gave such practical steps there, because once you find out what that looks like, it really helps you narrow down what your buy box looks like. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, location, you have some great tips. And the one thing you mentioned just resonated. I know you said you started out with, you had a friend that was doing the Burr method. And if you've read David Green's book about the Burr method, one thing he mentions in there is like buying in the path of progress as well. And that's pretty smart, is like trying to foresee what the development and the expansion and what that's going to look like, and strategically buying that way. So, that's pretty sharp. And then it seems like you guys were sort of also, when you were catering for your ideal guest, whatever that specific avatar would look like, you're like, what would we do? So then it makes it a little bit easier, because the clearer you can get on, whatever client or customer you servicing, the better you can provide them with, or the better service level you can provide them with. And if you're doing that and you're focusing on the value that you're giving them, then it becomes easy to justify a higher price point as well. So it seems like you guys were sort of trying to also outclass your competition in creating just better service above it all. But now I do have a question for you, because I have spoken to other short-term rental investors that say they always have the backup strategy of, would this, or not always, but they try to, would this work as a long-term rental if things just didn't pan out on the short-term rental side? And of course, if you are going for the higher end properties, then cash flowing properties become sort of non-existent. It becomes really hard to cash flow with a higher price point property, right? Rather than split it up into smaller properties. But I can definitely see the appeal and the reasoning behind it being more profitable from that perspective, because it's a you could charge a lot more. There's also the cost is less, having cleanup and rotation on one bigger property than split amongst many smaller properties as well. What's your take on that? Is that even a factor for you guys when you're choosing a property? Like, are we going to run the numbers, see what this looks like in a worst case scenario, at least in the beginning? At this point in time, you guys are obviously confident. You've got your systems and your procedures, you've got the experience, you've got all that locked in, where you're not second guessing if this is going to work for you or not, because you know what it takes to launch it successfully, to manage it and run it successfully. But at least going in, was that a factor for you guys? Is that even something you'd recommend to a friend that's wanting to get into the space, that they even look at it as a potential long-term rental as well, if it doesn't work out?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said earlier, we're very risk adverse. So when we first started, we kind of looked at, okay, these are fixer uppers, right? So
yeah,
once we finish renovations, is there a good chance, assuming the market stays the same and nothing catastrophically happens, but even if it does dip a little bit, it's still coming down to what you purchased it at, right? So if you buy right, and for us, we knew that we were forced appreciating these properties, that, hey, if for whatever reason they shut down or turn the tap off on short-term rentals tomorrow, could we sell this, break even, or make a profit, right? That's kind of always thinking. What we look at.
Yeah.
So if you can find a property, if you really want to be safe and you can find a property where you can do that, that's like a great exit strategy. Obviously, when we first got started, property prices were much less. So our first 2 or 3 purchases would have made sense, and still do make sense, if we switch to long-term, right? If we put a tenant in there, although I'm not a fan of Ontario's tenancy laws, but if we had to, we could, and we would be able to hold the property. That being said, our Niagara Lake properties, that one, I guess, was a bit more risk, but we kind of looked at all the factors. We looked at how big tourism and how important tourism is, but we also looked at kind of how Airbnbs or how vacation rentals get shut down, and it's complaint basis. So we bought properties that are surrounded by vineyards. Our neighbors are vines. Pretty good chance they're not going to call the city and complain if we have a slightly loud guest. So we looked at that as, okay, there's some risk aversion there. So that's kind of the one thing that we did with Niagara Lake, knowing that it was a higher purchase price. Yes, there was some work and some renovations involved, but do I think we could have sold it for a profit on go live date? No, because we put a ton of money into the outdoors that doesn't really add value to like the property itself. From a vacation rental, definitely. So yeah, I guess it really depends on your risk aversion, but I would look at all those external factors. If you're buying in an area where you have neighbors front, left, back, center, and you need it to work as a short-term rental, then, you might want to be careful.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And that was one thing I was thinking about is, potentially that was a backup strategy was, hey, it might not work as a long-term rental in general if you're going for high-end properties, but maybe it works as a flip. Worst case scenario, we sell it, we break even, or we make a little extra on it. But again, given that you guys have built up to this, it wasn't the first property you've you could justify taking a little bit more risk than you might with your first property that you're getting into, where you're trying to get proof of concept, making sure that this actually works for you and that you know what it takes to run it. So that aside, now we sort of narrowed down our buy box location. We started first getting to know why people are coming, why people would need my service based on where I'm located. Is this a destination hotspot? What sort of people are coming in, why they're coming, so we know what we're catering toward, and narrowing down which part of the city or where you're looking for, what that property type needs to look like. And then we figured out what the numbers look like using software that can sort of give us an idea. So we got all that dialed in, purchased the property, and now it comes time to get it show ready. So on a basic level, I think all people can understand, hey, I might be good at taking selfies, but let's get good quality pictures here. Let's not we can't just get away with these amateur looking pictures. So we need high quality pictures. But before that, maybe I can't get away with just IKEA furniture. Maybe I need to differentiate myself from the competition. Any advice for people out there on a design perspective, a design aspect, where you can get a good balance into, I'm not just throwing money away unnecessarily. This is actually going to be worth what I'm spending, and set me up for success long term.
So this is a part of where short-term rentals have really evolved in the last 3 to 4 years, where people are favoring really fun, unique designs that are, when you're looking at the listing, you can tell who it's catered to. So like fun prints, bold, like colors, that stuff tends to really stand out, and everything needs to look put together. And I feel like when we first started on Airbnb, you just had to put like a bed, a couple end tables, and you would call it a day. Where now it has to look very much lived in without being lived in, if that makes sense. So you need all like the trinkets, you need like the books, like that kind of thing. It looks like someone's there without being there, and it makes people feel more at home. That being said, you kind of nailed on the head. There are things that we spend more money on for quality, and there are things that we get from IKEA or Walmart or the dollar store that are cheap, but you wouldn't know and no one really cares. So we say like high touch surfaces. That's going to be like your dining tables, chairs, bed frames, couches. That stuff needs to be higher end. We like to do higher end pillows as well. Because we've gone to Airbnbs and the pillows are flat and old. You're like, this sucks, right? That totally impacts your stay. And it's not that expensive to get something really nice. And not for the pillows, like the decorative pillows that go in front. I just mean for the ones that you're actually sleeping on. They're not that expensive to get. Where we tend to cheap out on is we'll still get like the knickknacks for a kitchen. Like we want everything that someone would ever want for a kitchen. That's why we tell people try to like live in your Airbnb for a couple of days and cook all of your meals there, because every little thing you need, your guest needs. We get a lot of those things at Walmart and the dollar store, because like who needs a really high-end potato peeler? It's fine to be at the dollar store, We'll get a bunch of stuff off Wayfair, desks, Amazon. End tables don't need to be overly expensive. Just don't let them break. If you can find good cute lamps that aren't really expensive, stuff like that, you can kind of go a little cheaper on. But anything where a guest is really going to use it, like couch for sure, bed frames, you want those to last. You want them to look good. So we tend to spend a little more money on. And then obviously like outdoor furniture and stuff like that. We love having fire tables and outdoor seating and fire pits. And we tend to go a little higher end with those as well.
Oh, that's great points. Knowing where to spend and where it's not needed. A question for you: when you guys get started with this, do you guys have like a theme in mind? Are you going for sort of something that's a little bit more minimalistic, or are you going for something that's like completely on the opposite end of the spectrum, where this is just really different, really stand out with the overall design? When you're thinking holistically, what is this going to look like, and you're sort of piecing it together before you get all the pieces and build things out? What does that look like for you guys? Where do you guys sort of aim? Because I know of people that sort of have a theme towards each property, like this is the theme that we're going for, and then they try and build around that theme. What does that look like for you guys?
We don't always land on like a specific theme. We should probably get maybe a little better at that, but we definitely look at our guest avatar. We talk about who we're attracting to this, who do we like to host, and then every single design aspect is geared towards them. It tends to be a lot of things that we like. So we like to host couples, we like to host families. We get a lot of like older couples that come in. It's really lovely, and they tend to really love it. So everything is really designed towards that. We have worked with a design team before.
Yeah.
Pink Wall Design, if you know them, they're on Instagram as well. They do fantastic work, and they worked with us. They actually we have a really nice games room in one of our Ellicottville properties. We converted a really big garage into a games room, and they completely designed it. It's super bold. It's not something I think we would have thought of on our own, but
Yeah.
it photographs amazing, and it completely goes towards our avatar, which is mostly families. So families, like kids, are looking through this listing, they're like, I want that games room, and the parents are like, well, I'll book it, because now the kids are in a separate
Keep the
area,
kids
all good,
busy,
and we
keep them
can
happy. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So it's perfect. So if you don't feel like you can do it on your own, then we have outsourced design when we want something to be really nice within a budget.
Say we like do cater to a lot of like the health and wellness too, to an extent. Like we
Yes.
don't fully do like gyms, but most of our places have the hot tubs, the wood barrel saunas. So like the
Oh
ones that are
man. Yeah.
outdoors, which are
Yeah.
like really, really nice. And then where we spend like a lot of our money in is in the outside, especially in this area, because Ashley mentioned people come here to see Niagara on the Lake. They're not here to be in a $1.2 million showcase kitchen, although,
Yeah.
they're nice, but people want to spend time outdoors. So we kind of tailor what that experience would be like. So, if they're going to be outside and they're spending the top dollar for a weekend in July, we try to have that outdoor seating covered. So even if it rains, they're still able to be outside, have that fire table going, have the string
Yeah.
lights, have a glass of wine, and still look at the vineyards without it ruining their experience. So you want to think of where they're going to spend the most time and what makes their experience great. And that's kind of the first thing that we look at when we go and tour a property that we're looking to purchase is, where's the potential here? Like the guest is going to walk through this house and kind of like, what are they going to do when they stay here? How are they going to converse around this fire table or this seating area here? And just kind of think ahead of that experience and make it, set up so it can be special for them.
And then you've kind of alluded to it already a while before, is we're always looking to make updates to our listings, because competition starts to catch up. You want to stay ahead of the competition. We're always looking to improve. So recently at the house in Niagara on the Lake, we actually put in a sport court, which is like a pickleball court with a basketball net. It
Yeah.
took a lot of time, and the biggest flack we got from this is we have very famously said that there are no comps. We can give you absolutely zero data on whether or not that is going to actually bring in more money, and it is a very sizable investment.
Yeah.
So how we came about this decision is we're looking at the property and we're like, what would we want on this? Who is our avatar? And you're able to look, we've been operating for a number of years. You're able to look back on that avatar. I'm like, what would that avatar like? And we put up this sport court. Again, no data to back it. It looks beautiful. We got professional photos. It looks great. And we have seen probably an almost $10,000 increase every single month since that has gone live from August.
Wow. And that was
Yeah.
one thing I was going to mention you both mentioned it. Actually, you mentioned it with the kitchen utensils and stuff. And Spencer, you mentioned it with regards to the outdoor side and making sure that you cater for everything to really give them that experience, is live in the property for a little bit. And
Mhm.
I think that is such a overlooked tip, because how inconvenient is it if you go to you book a property on Airbnb, you go there and you're like, oh, I need this kitchen utensil, or I need that. Now do we run to the store? Do we need to buy this just for this vacation? To have everything just catered is such a level of convenience. Now all of this contributes to the 5-star reviews, and that's what I want to get into next. But I think people shouldn't overlook that. Those are some great tips there. Is living the property, put yourself in the guest's shoes. How can you level up the experience? How can you make things more convenient? Where's the guest spending their time? Are they spending it indoors? Are they spending it outdoors? How can I make that environment even better? And then, like you mentioned, there wasn't comparables, but you thought, hey, this would be a great value add for the experience. And surprise, surprise, you were right. But you guys are able to put yourself in the guest's shoes and just level up from there. And of course, there's no comparables for that. But guess what? That sets you guys apart from everyone else. So, of course, if you judge correctly in what that value add would look like, there would be outsized returns. So, again, all that makes for better experience for your guests and results in more 5-star reviews. But that's just one aspect to it, right? That's the design side, that's the experience side, but the experience side goes far beyond that. So for someone getting into this, how can they ensure that they're setting up a 5-star experience from the beginning till the end for their guests?
Yeah, I think kind of just back to what Ashley said is think about like what they're going to touch and use the most and make that quality. So even you can go deep into the kitchen stuff, right? Like the potato peeler doesn't get used as much, but a knife set does. Same thing with forks and knives, right? Those are going to get used. Wine glasses are going to get used. Coffee mugs. Coffee is, I'm super bullish on a really nice coffee station because there's so many people. I booked places because they have a good coffee setup and they like stage in, you have the steam coming out of the mugs and it's like an espresso machine. They've got the ground coffee, the decaf, like everything set up to the point where I'm like, okay, like I have already envisioned myself waking up and having coffee at this place. We're booking it. Yeah. So like you can go really deep into that stuff and think about like everywhere, the linens, the pillows, like all of that, just wherever the guests are going to spend time, quality for sure. That will give you probably the biggest head start in terms of overall reviews. Like most of the time, if you nail those things, guests don't eat. You're going to get a lot of guests that show up and then leave and then just say like, hey, we had a great stay. Thank you so much. And like, you just forgot that you just made $2,000, right? Like that's kind of the way that it is. And right, like people won't bother you because everything is just set up perfectly because you've thought of it ahead of time.
And another thing, and I know this might be kind of basic or obvious, but is just being very hospitable, being very quick to respond. With our team, we expect them to respond within 10 to 15 minutes to every single message. If there's an issue, not telling people that they're wrong, just being very compassionate and apologizing for the experience that they're having. We send money back, but we've also kind of shifted not towards just saying, here's some money back for the inconvenience, but saying things like, how can we make your stay better? So they're telling you what you want, what they want in order to probably give you a 5-star review. Or we're sending gift cards and saying, hey, dinner tonight is on us, that kind of thing, because things happen. We have all the systems in place, and sometimes things that worked 5 minutes ago just stop working and we can't fix it and we don't know how to fix it. But you can at least be compassionate and understanding to the person who's complaining about it and then try to remedy that. The other thing that we've gotten really great at is implementing cleaning accountability software. We use Breezeway. There's a few others that kind of do the same thing, but cleaners are human. They do multiple cleans and sometimes they forget little details. And what this is basically a checklist that they have to go and check off to make sure they've done. And it's the same every single clean so that you know the property's turned over exactly how you want it every single time. And it provides a report so that if a guest, unfortunately this does happen, if a guest comes in and tries to say, the house isn't clean, give me a full refund, we actually have a timed report with date and time that it was completed with completed photos of everything that we can actually submit. And that has worked for Airbnb to say, no, we're not going to issue a full refund to that guest. So that's very twofold. And on top of that, instead of forgetting, oh, did I send the cleaner her schedule this week? This auto schedules every single clean. So our missed cleans have gone to pretty well zero now.
Yeah. And that's what I was thinking, because, you guys give a ton of tips on the upfront design aspect and leveling that up. And then there's obviously the operational side of things, for the client experience, from the arriving at the property to needing any assistance or having any feedback to them leaving, that entire journey. And of course, there's things you guys do on an operational level for how they access the property, how they get hold of you, how you set things up for them, and that entire experience there. So no, those are some great points. Now, speaking on the operational side of things, because I think that's probably the only part that we haven't really dug deeper into. Um, what are some just complete game changers? You mentioned the software, so now you don't have to think. That's sort of, because I'm a big fan of SOPs. I'm a big fan of systems.
Mm-hmm.
You know, creating just efficiency in that. Create a system, automate what you can, delegate what you can, and have an easy to follow guide for those people who you're delegating to, so that it's just repeatable. You're not just doing this on the whim. You sort of building something that gives you the best output. So for people out there who have so many things to think about because they're just getting into this, they haven't had the repetitions you guys have had to really dial things in. What were some game changes that you guys adjusted along the way where you're like, man, if only we were doing this sooner, kind of thing? Or, wow, this was tiny, but it gave us like an outsized return in terms of time relief or guest experience. Anything that comes to mind there?
Lots. So we are very much like you. We love SOPs. We love processes. We got into short-term rentals because we are avid travelers. We don't like being away only a couple times a year. So being in a job which told you where to be and when to be there and for how long you could not be there for just wasn't really in the cards for us. That's sort of how we started looking into real estate. We saw short-term rentals could get us there. We realized really early on how hands-on it was. And that is instantly when we said, we need to create systems so this business can operate while we are in Asia for a month, while we are in Bali for a month, while we're in recently Europe for a month. We're in different time zones and this can operate efficiently. So we are very big on systems. One of them, which we already mentioned, which is Breezeway, the cleaner accountability. That is a game changer for us. Second one is e-locks is a really big one for us. It's actually mandatory for all of our management clients for the most part, because we need people to access the property whenever they get in. But not just that, we have fail safes for basically everything. And we have learned this from experience because e-locks like to die. And e-locks like to die when you don't think that they're going to die, especially in our Canadian winters.
Of course.
They tend to freeze.
Yeah.
So we have lock boxes on site that are backups where a guest can actually go and get a physical key. Any door that can lock inside the home has a lockbox somewhere with a backup key, because I cannot tell you how many times people have locked themselves out of rooms that you're like, how did that happen? But that's okay. There's keys in the house, so no one has to drive there. And then for our management side, we have built up a ton of onboarding documents that they take a long time, but they have serial numbers and model numbers for basically everything in the house. So that, say if the TV breaks, we can call a technician and say, it's a Samsung TV, it's this model number, it's this serial number, this is the issue. It increases the likelihood that when the guy goes out there, he already sort of knows what the issue might be. He might even bring a part with him. Same with like dishwashers and stuff. Otherwise, the technician needs to go out there, diagnose it, go back, order the part, and then come back and fix it. It just speeds that time up. It also helps if there's like a weird error code, you can put that into like ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is really good at helping you figure out what that stuff is. We have photos, videos of basically everything. It's a very extensive onboarding process.
And my personal favorite from a systems standpoint, because, we kind of learned this like as you go. You get a lot of people ask the same question over and over again. And, I look like a lot of people, and there's a lot of smart people out there, but there's a lot of questions that come in. You're like, how do I adjust the thermostat up and down? Right? Well, there's an arrow that goes up and down. It's simple to you, but maybe not for them. So we have guidebook videos on how to use literally everything in the property. So how to adjust that thermostat, how to navigate the TV to Netflix or to cable, how to turn the fire table on, how to turn the sauna on, how to lift the hot tub cover off. Literally everything. So that way, like, even if people don't want to self troubleshoot and go, because they're given, there's a QR code usually at like a welcome kind of amenity when they walk in, they'll have a QR code to the Wi-Fi and that digital guidebook. Even if they don't want to go and self troubleshoot that, it takes myself or one of us or someone on our team 10 seconds to go and grab that link and say, here's how to use it. Right. And it's a quick 10 to 15-second video, right? We don't want people wasting their time on vacation, but that alone, we've had so many guests say like how much they love that aspect of it. Because even if you are a hospitable host, right, and you're on the phone trying to troubleshoot, that usually takes 3 to 5 times longer when you're trying to explain how to do something versus physically showing someone like that is the exact fire table for that property. This is how you use it. And that alone has been probably one of my favorite operational kind of things.
It's probably the most talked about thing in our reviews.
Yeah. And we can't quantify it because before we did it, we would get those questions, but we can't quantify what we don't get now. But I know that we get those questions way, way less than we used to. So that alone, if you're a single host, you don't have to go to the Hostfully guidebook route. You could literally just have a private YouTube video page that you just send people the link to that for each guest and its own view only. And it's just how to use that. That's a way to do it for free.
I love that. I guess I was thinking you probably could like try and quantify it by the views as you see what the amount of views on each video is, right? But I love that because I think of that myself is if you're going away on vacation, your hosts could be fantastic people. But realistically, I'd prefer to not have to speak to them if I don't have to. You know what I mean? Like I'm on vacation. I don't want to make unnecessary phone calls and then trying to workshop this. And you're right, being able to visually see it versus someone trying to walk you through it on the phone. Huge difference. So if you don't have to be speaking to anybody, you could watch a quick video and be like, that's how you do it. Quick fix. That makes for a fantastic experience. In fact, I prefer a video versus trying to read through like an instructional booklet to try and figure that out. So that makes a ton of sense. Like all of those things that you guys mentioned there, you know, the backups on the lock boxes and having access and fail safes and even up to like the serial numbers and stuff. That just seems like no-brainers across the board in making it more efficient to manage this and scale. I mean, I think that in itself for people who listen this far that were looking for a tip on how I scale, because maybe I've already got a few properties, but I want to look to scale, finding those efficiencies or rather the inefficiencies that you have and fixing those little pieces gives you a lot more time freedom and it gives you the ability to be able to scale. That's amazing, guys. That's a mic drop moment there. You know, I know we've already gone over time, and yet I feel like I know there's so much more that we can cover. So what I will do for everyone listening is I'm going to leave your guys' contact info or all your socials, whatever links you guys want to share. I'm going to leave it all in the show notes below for people to follow you. Off the top of your head, for people out there who are driving, they might not even be watching, where's the best place for them to reach you? What's social or email or what's the best spot to follow along with you guys?
We're the most active on Instagram, and it's pretty easy. It's just at Spencer and Ashley.
Awesome. So you guys out there, the fun doesn't have to stop here. Go ahead, follow Spencer and Ashley. And guys, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing. This has really been insightful. It's been fun. And, you know, I look forward to having you again one day because I know that there's a ton that we can still cover. And for people listening out there and you're thinking to myself, oh my gosh, there's a lot that goes into this. You heard it. Your Ashley and Spencer actually help other investors and other people looking to get into the short-term rental space. I think it's on the management side, if I'm not mistaken.
Management and also personal. We're always looking for investors and everything like that.
Perfect. So if you guys just want to take all the brain damage out of trying to figure it out yourself, feel free to reach out to Spencer and Ashley. But guys, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing. This has been amazing.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
It was fun.
To our listeners out there, if you're looking for more valuable insights, be sure to subscribe, share this with someone who can benefit, and as always, keep investing smartly. Thank you for tuning in to the Wealth Through Real Estate Show. If you want to scale in multifamily real estate in Canada and abroad, don't want to miss my episode with Keith Bouchard. This is your host, Alray Noble, signing off.